Real quick, give me a little bit of information about yourself. How many of you guys have been accused at some point in your life of being a bad communicator? Like you've had somebody, absolutely. Like some situation has not gone off well and like the tension has ramped up and maybe there's been a fight, you and your spouse, you and your parents, you and a friend, something. And then it finally comes about where they're like, well, you're just bad at communication. And you're like, well, I don't really know how to fix that, right? But okay. And actually what's interesting is over the years, obviously me and my family run a business together. We planted a church together and all these different leadership opportunities I've had. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten people together in a circle and I've said, the problem here is communication. Like most of the time, to be honest with you, I'd say the majority of the times there's tensions and I'm the one who's in charge of fixing the tensions. Most of the time it's like the whole problem is communication. There's a lack of clarity in regards to understanding each other's motives and the way something was said, and we just need to bring clarity to our communication. Communication is extremely important in our interpersonal relationships, but as well, it's really important with God as well. And that's one of the things I want to focus on today as we get going into this next year. God is pulling us and drawing us forward to really shift into action, I believe, inside of our faith. It's one of the things that God, I think, is pointing us towards. The last couple of years, we've been on this amazing journey. God specifically last year talked about how he was kind of calling our church to build a legacy, which is an interesting season we're in. Obviously, as a growing church, a church that actually is literally building a building at the same time. But the idea of shifting our attention to legacy, that's what we spent our whole last year focusing on. And then I felt like this year, God was kind of shifting our attention to that word build. I told you last week, if you weren't here last week, okay, not because it's like me speaking and I'm proud of myself. Like, you need to go and watch my message. What I'm saying is if you're going to be part of Acts Church in this next year, I would really encourage you to go back and listen to last week's message or watch last week's message because it's going to tell you where we're going in this next year. We're going to focus in on this, so please do, if you missed it, go back and take a look at it. This year we want to focus on that word build, to build a legacy. Build is the verb, legacy is the noun. That's where we're going, but build are the actions that we need to take. I told you this last week. To build is to develop according to a systematic plan by a definite process on a particular base. It's kind of like shifting whatever it is you're going to do into action, and I think that's what we need to do with our faith this next year. We sit at the beginning of a really fascinating year as a church where a lot of things are happening. Church is growing, awesome opportunities, and I believe God is creating this legacy mindset in our church. But what we really need to do this next year is we need to shift our faith into action. Post-COVID, post-lockdowns, post-whatever. So many people, I think, are still living out their faith like it's a noun, like something like that you have sitting on a shelf. That's not what faith is. Faith is something that you actually do, you experience, it comes through you. It's a verb. And I would ask you this, what are you going to build in 2023? Your life will erect something. It will develop something in this next year. But what if instead of just doing that by accident, what if you actually intentionally decided what are the things that need to be developed? What are the things that need to go through a process to strengthen? In 1 Corinthians, I shared this with you last week, Paul was talking about kind of what we get to build in our life. He's talking about how he laid a foundation and then leaders in the church and people in the church are going to build the rest of their life on this foundation. Here's what he says in 1 Corinthians 13, 11 through 15. For no one can lay any foundation other than one that I already have, Jesus Christ. Just for reference, if you're a Christian, can't have any other foundation than that. He says, anyone who builds on that foundation may use a variety of materials, gold, silver, jewels, wood, hay, or straw. Now, that's a really, really varied list of things, right? When you get to straw compared to gold, these are massively different substances that we could build on top of this foundation. He says, but on the judgment day, fire will reveal what kind of work each builder has done. The fire will show if a person's work has any value. If the work survives, that builder will receive a reward. But if the work is burned up, the builder will suffer great loss. The builder will be saved, but like someone barely escaping through a wall of flames. It's this great picture that Paul says each of us get to build something on this foundation. This foundation of Christ, each of us are going to build a life on top of it. And I like what he says, just for clarity's sake. He says, we're not saved by anything we build. Let's make sure we're clear on that. He says, we're saved by grace in Jesus. But he said, you're going to live this life, and someday your life is going to kind of basically come before God, and he's going to run it through this refining process. And everything that didn't really have value is just going to get burnt up. And he says in that moment, there's going to be some that are going to have this great reward because they built something that truly was built to last, something that was legacy, something that lives on beyond them in this world, something that actually goes on to touch eternity. He says it'll be this great reward and celebration. But he says there are also some that, to be honest with you, you're going to be saved in that moment. But in that moment, it's going to be a really sad moment. You'll have this moment before you go on into your eternal joy where you'll realize everything I built was just decimated. Everything I spent my time on in my life equaled up to nothing. Nothing lasted. Nothing exists beyond just the few short years I was there. And he says it would be like the person kind of standing in front of their house, burnt to the ground, and saying, what was the point of all of that? And the whole idea is he's saying, you need to build something that actually lasts. You need to shift your attention from just focusing so much on building the here and now, because that's what our culture always focuses on. It's building something for the weekend, building something for this next year. It's always about just kind of the short run pleasure that we can have. And he says, instead, you need to shift your mind to this long run view of building something that would truly last. I told you this, the secret to building something that truly lasts is find something God is doing and become part of it. You can build a multitude of things, but the secret to knowing you're building something that's lasting is finding somewhere that God is moving and then becoming a part of it. That's why I think that God has invited us as a church into this next season of saying, build his church. Build his church. We talked about there's a multitude of different ways to do that. You're his church, so building yourself and your faith is building his church. The people sitting around you today are his church, so building relationships and encouraging and strengthening others would be building his church. There are those in your life that are lost and don't know Jesus, and you bringing them to Jesus is building his church. It's developing that foundation that kind of the rest of your life is built on. And not only that too, but then we're meant to build his glory. That we're supposed to find ways that we leverage our life so that God will be more glorious on this earth than he is currently, instead of just making our own glory well known. Now, if we're going to do this, you need to know where God is working in your life. You need to understand what God is doing, where he is moving, and that's what brings me back to the idea of communication. We say we want to be part of something that lasts. Maybe you feel that where you're like, yeah, I don't just want to build something for this week. I don't just want to build something for this life. When I get to heaven someday, I want to know I built something that actually had real value. And I would say then what you need to do is you need to hear and know where God is working in your life, so that you can follow along with him. And I don't just mean in general, like with the church, because of course that's part of it. You say, I'm going to be part of a team, I'm going to be part of what we're doing as a church, and I know God's building that, but as well, God is moving in the lives of the people who are around you. God is moving in the lives of the people sitting next to you in church. God is moving in the lives of the people in the community. And when you see that God is moving, again, what I'm saying is to do something that lasts is knowing where God is moving and then joining along with him. But you're not going to know where God is moving if you don't talk with him. And see, this is where we get to the idea of prayer. Prayer is talked about as like a really, really it's like a holy word. Pray. Have you prayed today? Are you in prayer? All these. It's literally just talking to God. Every faith has a subject of prayer, has the concept of the idea that you would talk to the God who is in charge of the universe. But Christianity stands alone. And here's why. We actually saw God become a man and come to this earth. And this is what's fascinating. When God became a man and came to this earth as Jesus, the people around him marveled at his prayer life. Now that's kind of strange to think about, isn't it? That God became a man and came to this earth, and the people who were closest by him, they said his prayer life was fascinating. In fact, in Luke 11, 1-4, check this out. It says, once Jesus was in a certain place praying. As he finished, one of his disciples came to him and said, "Lord, teach us to pray as John taught his disciples." He says, just like John's a rabbi, taught his disciples, the way you pray is amazing. Teach us how to pray like you. And Jesus says this is how you should pray. Father, may your name be kept holy. May your kingdom come soon. Give us each day the food we need and forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. And don't let us yield into temptation. Now, this is often known as the Lord's Prayer. It was a model that he gave to them. And I think we might be surprised by this because Jesus often would spend a lot of time really like breaking down things and explaining things. But in this moment where they say, how should we pray? He gives a really simple format. The first thing he does is he says, the first thing you should do is focus on God's glory, right? First things first, let your kingdom come, right? Your will be done kind of on this earth. It's about God's glory first in my life and on this world. And then he shifts out of that into the areas of our life that need his touch. He talks about sustenance in our life, provision, right? He talks about needing God's forgiveness in our life. He talks about God giving us kind of the ability to become like him and forgive others just like he's forgiven us. And then protection from what the enemy would try to bring into our life. He actually continues in the same strand, okay? In Luke 11, 5 through 10, the very next verses, he says this, then teaching them some more about prayer, he used this story. Suppose you went to a friend's house at midnight, wanting to borrow 3 loaves of bread. You say to him, a friend of mine has just arrived for a visit. I have nothing for him to eat. And suppose he calls out from his bedroom, don't bother me. The door is locked for the night. My family and I are all in bed. I can't help you. But I tell you this, though he won't do it for friendship's sake, if you keep knocking long enough, he will get up and give you whatever you need because of your shameless persistence. He says this in verse 9, and so I tell you, keep on asking. You will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking and you will find. Keep on knocking and the door will be open. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks finds, and everyone who knocks the door will be open. And this is a story, as he says, let me teach you about prayer. Fascinatingly, he turns into this picture of one of the things that prayer is marked by is this persistence in regards to prayer. Now, I need you to get this. When Jesus tells a story, all analogies break down. I need you to get the fact he wasn't saying like, you know how your friend is a jerk and wouldn't help you? He's like, God's just like that. That's not what he's saying, okay? That's not what he's saying. He's saying like, you know how your friend's a jerk and like he won't help you, but if you just kept knocking, he would be like, goodness, okay, fine. He's like, well, God's way better than that. But he said, just like that principle, that when you continue in something, all of a sudden something will break free in your life. He says the same principle exists inside of prayer. I need you to get this. Just in a few verses, what Jesus shows his disciples where they say, how do we talk to God like you talk to God? What Jesus basically points out is for prayer like me, here's what you need to do. You need to make it simple, but it needs to be consistent. Keep it simple. He doesn't go on some big crazy thing that you have to do, not some big format you need to use. He's like, keep it simple. But you need to keep it consistent. That's where the power really comes in, simple and consistent. When the same story is told in Matthew, okay, we actually get some more things. He kind of goes off and riffs a little bit more in a different direction. Maybe, I don't know, Luke kind of compiled what he had heard, but Matthew was right there. He was one of the disciples. And he actually says that Jesus says a couple more things really quick about prayer. Let me show them to you. Matthew 6, 5 through 6 says this, when you pray, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray publicly on street corners and in synagogues where everyone can see them. I tell you the truth, that's all the reward they will ever get. When you pray, go by yourself, shut the door behind you, and pray to your Father in private. And then your Father who sees everything will reward you. He says, when we talk about praying, just for reference, I need you to get the fact that the goal of prayer isn't to look holy, it's to be holy, right? He's like, the goal isn't to look godly, it's to become godly. He says, I don't need you to really make a big show of this. He says, in fact, it's most likely better that you just go and you just focus on you and God, because that's actually what prayer is all about. It's not about impressing somebody else. It's about you communicating to God, right? It's about you and him in communication. And he continues in the very next verse, verse 7 through 8. He says this, and when you pray, don't babble on and on as the Gentiles do. They think their prayers are answered merely by repeating their words again and again. Don't be like them, for your Father knows exactly what you need even before you ask him. He says, not only that, but I need you to get this, because I think the cool part about Jesus is he immediately knows where people's minds are running. He talks about consistency in prayer, and they think, oh, so like it's just like I just wear God down. I say it enough times, and then he's going to give it to me. And he's like, no, that's how Gentiles think. Like if I repeat this prayer enough times, it's got to come true, right? Even some different religious strategies still to this day do this, and it's kind of a misuse of this where it's like repeat this prayer 100 times. God's not impressed by us repeating a single prayer 100 times. That's not how God works. God actually knew what you needed before you even began to pray. I need you to get this. When you pray, you're not bringing anything to God's attention. Do you get that? Like, he's not like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize you were short on money, right? Like he knows exactly what your bank account is. He knows, right? Like whatever it is you're struggling with, he absolutely knows before you even start to pray. So the point isn't like that I bring this to your attention or that I convince you by saying it enough times that you go, yeah, I guess maybe you're right. I saw it a different way, but after you said it to me that 100th time, I figured maybe you're right. He says, that's not it at all. God already knows what it is you need before you begin to pray. So I need you to get this. The reason why we would pray to God isn't to convince him or isn't to twist his arm. The reason why we would pray to God, we communicate with him, is for us to share our heart on a situation and then to listen to his heart on a situation. Amen. Real quick, because it's 2023, okay? This is how all communication was supposed to happen. Somebody was supposed to go, here's my opinion and my feelings on this circumstance. This is my opinion on what I think about this. And then the other person is supposed to go, here's my feelings on that subject. And I actually feel this. And that's interesting how some of the things that we see are the same, but some of the things are different. Because I know we live in 2023 where it's like, well, here's what I feel. It's like, oh, cool, racist. Well, no, I was just saying, yeah, I know, bigot, get out of my face, right? Like anybody who could believe any of that, I refuse to talk to. Because we live in this insane, hyper, crazy world right now where communication has just been destroyed in our culture. I need you to get this, okay? This is how all communication is supposed to be. And it's the same with God, where you're supposed to share, here's what I feel about the circumstances of my life, about the situation in my life. And then get this, you're supposed to stop and listen and go, but God, what do you have to say about this subject? God, what do you feel about this subject? And we listen to what it is that he has to speak into our life, and then we blend those things together and find wise counsel inside of it. This is my thought, okay? Jesus was the most perfect person ever, right? He was sinless, right? Like no barriers between God because of sin, no issue with that because we know sin separates us from God. In all reality, let me reword that, sin doesn't separate us from God. Sin causes us to separate ourselves from God, right? We sin and then we run from God and we separate ourselves from God because we don't really want to be close to him because we know what's going on in our life. The sin isn't what separates us, but the sin is what causes us to separate. But even though Jesus was perfect, while he was here on this world, in order to build something that lasted, and obviously, Jesus is the master class on building something that lasted, right? 2,000 years later, here we are still talking about his teaching. Here we are still following what he laid out. He's a master class in regards to building something that truly did last. And I need you to get this. The thing that Jesus' life was marked by was that he constantly made time for communication with God. Even the sinless Son of God said, I need to devote a significant portion of my time to communication with the Father. Now, what that means to me is then we desperately need to get this right? He should be right in alignment with God, and it should be really easy for Jesus to follow along with where God is leading, and yet he says, I really need to speak to the Lord. And I go, well then, wow, we better really get this one straight because we have no clue in regards to being in alignment with God, right? Very many times, in my life, my heart says something completely different than what God wants. In fact, very often the sin in my life has clouded my life to the place where I kind of hide from him, run from him, and then I come back and I was like, oh yeah, I already knew this was true. true, and I tried to forget it because I didn't want to participate in it. So this idea of us being in communication with God must be of extreme importance. Listen to me, prayer has the potential to change our perspective on the world around us. Prayer has the potential to give us supernatural insight into the circumstances that surround us. Prayer has the potential to add the Holy Spirit's power into our lives, and prayer has the potential to send that same Holy Spirit power out into the lives of others who surround us. It could change a multitude of areas in our life. And for us who say, I want to shift into the perspective of building something that lasts, then it is of critical importance, because this is how we're going to hear where God is moving. This is how God's going to show us, here's the area of your life, since you're the church, that I want to develop. Okay, if God is moving there by me moving with him, I'm not fighting against him, I'm working with him. Here's the people in your life that I'm speaking to, and okay, awesome, that I'm going to walk in alignment with that. Here's that person in your neighborhood. Here's that person at school that I'm actually working in their life. I'm actually showing up and making them consider what their faith really is. And you're like, perfect, so I don't have to just scattershot, throw out random things at people. I know that that's the person who I'm going to spend time with and invest in, because that's who you're working with, God, and I can work alongside with you. Or God would show, this is where I'm working inside of bringing my glory to this community, and you would say, terrific, that I don't have to build your glory just randomly. I'm going to get in alignment with what you're doing so I can build something that truly lasts. Prayer is that source of getting connected with where God is going so that we can actually build something that really lasts. Now, here's the problem. Very many of us put almost no time into prayer during our week. Like the broad majority of Christians, we say a couple of sentences or phrases of prayers, maybe in the morning when we're in our car, and maybe we say a couple of sentences or phrases before we go to bed, and that's it. I found one study that said that the average person prays less than 1 minute per day. Who says they're a Christian? Less than 1 minute per day if you add it all together. As far as talking to God, very, very little. And this can be problematic because you're not sensing and hearing where it is that God's moving. You're not sharing your heart with him, so my guess is you're sharing it with someone else, and you're not listening to him, so maybe you're listening to someone else. Now, how can we get out of that habit into something that's better? There actually has been a tactic all the way back to the beginning of God's people. It's existed all the way back then that has worked as kind of a slingshot to get us into better communication with God. And it's the tool of fasting. Now, fasting, again, a word that sounds really, really spiritual. It's not. It's just not going without food, not having food. That's literally what the word translates, just removing food from our life. And throughout the history of God's people would declare these fasts where they would eliminate food from their life for a period of time, very often just a day, or maybe it would be a season. And they would take and do that so as to clear time and focus towards God in prayer. Fasting without prayer is useless. It's just called a diet, okay? And some of you guys, if you want to diet, that's great. If you want to go on a diet this next year, awesome. But there is no spiritual principle of just not eating that's talked about beneficial in the Bible. Specifically, the idea of skipping this food is so that we might devote ourselves in prayer. And I also need you to get this. What fasting isn't is us punishing ourselves to the point that God feels sorry for us and gives us something. I'm really struggling through this, God. God's going to have to come through and give it to me now, right? Because I didn't eat anything today, and there were donuts at work, and I said no, so now he has to give me what I asked for. Absolutely not. That's not the case at all. You see, the reality of why we would fast is instead being able to add time and focus to be able to spend on prayer that we would normally spend circled around food. Food actually takes up a significant portion of our days, doesn't it? It takes up a significant portion of our minds. What am I eating for breakfast? What am I eating for lunch? Have any of you guys ever been like me where you're eating breakfast and you're already what am I going to eat for dinner? You're yeah, legit. You're I'm already... It's man, I'm really craving Chinese food, right? Like this, while you're eating breakfast. And it's it's taking up so much mental space. Jesus actually did this when he was here on earth. When Jesus was getting ready to start his ministry, it was the beginning of this really important time in his life. Jesus was baptized, and then in the very next moment, it says he went off into the wilderness. And look at this story in Matthew 4, 1-4. It says, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted there by the devil. For 40 days and 40 nights he fasted and became very hungry. During that time the devil came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread." But Jesus told him, "No, the scriptures say people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." You see, he went out. Yeah, that's good, isn't it? That's Jesus. That's his words, red words right there. Yeah. He goes out and he focuses on prayer in this moment. He's fasting in order to be able to put his focus on prayer. And I love, the devil shows up and says exactly what any of us would think. Aren't you hungry? Aren't you starving? I mean, you're the Son of God. That's easy. Just tell these stones to become bread. And Jesus reveals the true heart of what fasting is about in this moment. He says, yes, I am hungry. My body desires bread. But he says, I need you to understand that for human beings, it's not just that we desire sustenance in our body. We desire something spiritually as well. And he says, in this moment, despite all of my hunger and all of the physical desire I have for food, even more than that desire, I desire the presence and the wisdom of God. Even more than I want that food, I want to hear the wisdom and insight of God. I want to hear the heartbeat of God even more than I want this food. Now, just for reference, okay? Fasting is not mandated in the Bible. It's not commanded in the Bible for us as Jesus followers. Nowhere in the Bible are Christians demanded or commanded to fast. But what we see happen is inside of the new church, whenever there were these moments of beginning into something that was important, very often they would collaborate fasting with prayer. And there's a reason why, because it adds something to the opportunity for prayer. In fact, Jesus said this in that same verse where he was talking about habits in regards to prayer. He specifically ties indirectly the idea of fasting with it. Right after that, in Matthew 6, 16-18, when he's saying, when you're praying, don't go out and pray in the streets, he says this, "And when you fast, don't make it obvious as hypocrites do. They try to look miserable and disheveled so people will admire them for their fasting. I tell you the truth, that's the only reward they'll get. But when you fast, comb your hair, wash your face, and then no one will notice that you are fasting except your Father, who knows what you do in private. And your Father, who sees everything, will reward you." He says the point isn't to look holy again, it's to be holy, right? And he says God sees this where you would take and you would say, more than I desire food, I desire you, Jesus. I love what Pastor John Piper said in one of his messages. He describes fasting this way, and I think it just encapsulates it in one sentence. Fasting is a temporary renunciation of something which is good in order to intensify our desire for something that is greater. Let me read it to you one more time. Fasting is a temporary renunciation of something which is good in order to intensify our desire for something which is greater. You see, the amazing part about fasting is it brings our bodies into alignment with our spirits. We have this longing and desire in our spirit to receive from God, and then when we partner it with fasting, our bodies are having the same feeling that our spirit is having. Where both are in this sense of longing, and your body is communicating the same feeling to your brain of being in longing desire to hear and receive from the Lord. Now, throughout Scripture, food is always the most common form of fasting, but it doesn't have to be food. Food is just the most common, and to be honest with you, I see why that's the case, because it is the most immediate to being able to feel that sense of desire and hunger inside of us. It immediately connects us and brings our body into alignment. But in fact, Paul even identifies one time when he was talking to people how it could be something different. He says this in 1 Corinthians 7, 3-4, talking about a man and wife in the marriage relationship. He says this, "The husband should fulfill his wife's sexual needs. The wife should fulfill the husband's husband's sexual needs. The wife gives authority over her body to her husband, and the husband gives authority over his body to his wife. And it says this, do not deprive each other of sexual relations unless you both agree to refrain from sexual intimacy for a limited time, so that you might give yourselves more completely to prayer. Afterwards, you should come back together again so that Satan won't be able to tempt you because of your lack of self-control. He says in the marriage relationship, okay, inside that marriage relationship, your sexual relationship is a good thing. It's a positive. And he says, but you could even take this place where you put this pause on this to say that the time and the energy and the longing that I feel inside myself, I'm going to direct towards the idea of God and how much I desire his wisdom and his love inside of my life. Guys out there, this next week, you want to impress your wives. Baby, I just think that this next week, we should abstain and we should focus in and we should fast and see the Lord move, right? Then at least it's in your control, guys, that nothing's happening that week, right? I just think, and maybe the next week she'll be like, I am with such a holy man of God. Wow. This next week, I just think we should just fast, honey. I don't think, I love you, you're beautiful, but I just want to focus in on the Lord. Wow, man, what a studly man of God I'm with. Now, just for reference, that's good. That's a good word. Just for reference, okay? Just for reference, if you're not married, this doesn't count. Real quick, just so you understand this, you can't fast sin. That's not the same thing. God, this next week, I'm going to not get blackout drunk to focus on prayer for you. It's like, well, you should do that anyway. Yeah, absolutely. That's called crucifying the flesh. That's called sanctification, right? Like, we're not going to sleep together. So like, well, you're not married. You shouldn't be doing that anyway. So sanctify yourself, crucify the flesh. The idea of fasting is giving up something that's a blessing in our life. It's something that's a good thing. It's something that God has gifted to us. But then we say, even more than I desire this, I desire you. You see, fasting focuses our heart on what really matters. Like John Piper said, it increases our desire for something that's even better. So, as we sit at the beginning of 2023, with God inviting us into this idea of building something that would truly last this next year, I would ask you this. Do you know what to do with God's invitation? That God is leaning in and he's saying, this next year, build something that lasts. Build my church, right? Focus on building something that's truly going to last by the time you get to the end of your life. And God is offering you that invitation, but I would ask you, do you really know what to do with that? Because if you're like me, you're like, but what does that mean? Like, what area of my life needs to be developed? What relationships do I need to grow? Who do I need to be praying for in my life that needs to know who Jesus is? Where do I need to direct my time, my energy, my finances so we can be focused on God's glory instead of my own? Jesus built something that lasted, and he focused on prayer, and I think we need to do the same. I think for many of us, our communication with God has been tremendously under-resourced in these last years. That some of you have just been shooting off these couple sentences, but you have not been taking time to actually speak to God, walk through situations in your life, lay out your heart, and then listen for his. So here's what I'd love to do. At the beginning of this year, I would love to lovingly push you into communication with God, okay? I would love to help you get started in the right direction at the beginning of this year to feel as though you could just kind of step in, slingshot past just a little bit of few steps, and instead really jump into talking and communicating with God. And here's what I would love to invite you to do. Today, we're going to kick off a 2-week fast over the next 2 weeks, okay? We're going to kick off a 2-week focus where we're going to fast and we're going to focus on prayer with God. Now, here's something that's interesting though. We're not going to fast food this year. We did that last year. We did that the year before. And throughout history, food is actually a really, really great thing to fast. You can fast from food whenever you would like to. And in years past, to be honest with you, when you think back in history, food has taken up a significant portion of our time. In fact, man, we go back just a little ways before our modernization. Food took all day to figure out. But now, honestly, food can happen pretty fast, right? You can just go through drive-through, right? You got the frozen stuff. You just put it in the microwave and you get there. One of the things that I've been really realizing in our church and in the church in the United States of America is that very many of us say we would love to hear from God. We would love to hear his heart on a situation, but our minds and our attentions are so stolen away from God that I wonder if God isn't shouting and we are just not hearing him. So here's what we're actually going to do. Tomorrow, we're declaring a 14-day fast, but it's not from food. It's from all things digital. It's from all things digital. I want to invite you, instead of giving up your food, I want to invite you on a challenging journey over the next 14 days to eliminate the social media apps from your life, to sign out of Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all those other things, to take and delete the YouTube app off your phone that you have a tendency to immediately jump to maybe take and even sign out of your Netflix account, or just if you want to, it's really simple. Those TVs nowadays, they have that fancy plug where it's one side on the other side and one side of the other. Just unplug both from the walls and go hide it somewhere. And in this next week, what I think that many of us, our attention is so stolen by all these things that we have no moments where we hear from God. We're always trying to jump in and get some other little fix of excitement. And to be honest with you, I don't know if you guys have done much in this. I love this stuff, so I read about it all the time. You guys, like me, I'm with you. We've literally become little dopamine junkies. Where it's grabbing something so we get our little hit of that's exciting, that's novel, that's interesting. But what if instead of grabbing our device, instead we put it back in our pockets and on that drive or in that moment between something or at the end of the day, we actually sat down and we said, God, here is my heart looking into this next year. What's yours? And I would love to help you guys do this, okay? First of all, we actually created a paper, yes, paper, youngins, not digital, paper prayer guide that is waiting for you as you leave today. It actually has 14 days, different focuses that you can pray throughout those days. General ones you can, but if you need help during the day of saying, what could I pray for today? We have a different focus each and every day that you can pray from, and there's an idea of notes that you can take on the back. Not only that, but not this Tuesday, but the next Tuesday in week 2, we're actually going to have a physical prayer meeting where we're going to get together and we are going to pray. That's it. We're going to pray together. But we're going to come together in order to pray in a quiet environment where there's not the situation of all your distractions. Maybe we'll even I was thinking about this, having a big old pile where you walk in and throw your phone on and be like, cool, no phones for the next 40 minutes while I pray and I focus in on God. Some of you guys have never spent an elongated portion of time in prayer. I'm not trying to dog on you, but I just mean some of you have never even spent 20 minutes quietly and going, I'm doing nothing over these next 20 minutes, but praying. Here's my thought, okay? First of all, if you do this, let me just be real with you. You're going to fail, okay? Like day 2, you're going to not even think about it. You're just going to pull it out, start scrolling, and then like 5 scrolls in, you're going to be like, dang it, right? And you're going to drop your phone and realize what you did, okay? Maybe even you get to the end of the day and you're like, I know I said I wasn't going to, but I need, and you're going to take and you're going to break and you're going to watch a YouTube video, right? But listen to me, don't give up. Just because you failed that day doesn't mean you can't do it the next day, right? It's not about having the perfect attendance. It's about leaning into it. So even if you mess up, it's like, okay, well, I'll start anew tomorrow, right? I can do it again and step back into it. And here's just my thought, okay? Some of you were like, I'm not doing it. I can't do it, Cameron. I can't log out. I can't miss 1 week. I can't miss 2 weeks without my creators. I can't miss 2 weeks without my shows, right? And you're stressing out already thinking about it. But listen to me, okay? What if in these next 2 weeks, if you did this, you logged out of these devices and you you took that same time and that same energy and that same longing where you get that dopamine, right? Day 2, you're going to be like a headache and feeling groggy and yelling at your spouse. And they're like, whoa, right? But what if you take that same focus, like, I just want to watch a video, I just want to scroll I just want to look. And what if you devoted that same energy to go, right, just as much as my mind wants to do that, more than I want that, I want to hear from the one true God. What if in 14 days, God could share wisdom into your life in a situation that you've been confused about for years? What if there's been a circumstance in your life that you've been confused about what the next step is or what the answer is for years, and all it would take is 2 weeks of getting quiet and you would hear God's wisdom on the situation? What if in the next 2 weeks, that foggy future that you've never been able to make out, that you've been kind of walking into and stumbling through, what if in the next 2 weeks' time, just by devoting this attention to God, all of a sudden he would push away the fog and you would have a clear picture of where your direction is for the next few years of your life? Turn it off. It was perfect timing. It was perfect timing. The devil is trying to distract you. Goodness. Listen to me. What if in 2 weeks, you could literally exit from that feeling as though you had an entirely different level of communication with God? Like where you really felt like I said this and I sensed his presence of hearing and communicating back to me. What if in these 2 weeks, God would clearly identify in your life an area of your life, and this isn't going to be fun, but I'm telling you it's going to be beneficial. What if in the next 2 weeks, God would clearly identify an area of your life that is deficient and needs growth? And God would say, this right here, if this doesn't grow, very, very soon you're going to come up against something and you're not going to be able to handle it. It's going to wreck you. This area needs to grow in this next season so you're prepared. What if in these next 2 weeks, God had a blessing for you? Something that he wanted to bring into your life. What if God is waiting to bring a blessing? Whatever it might be relational, it might be financial, it might be any of these different things. What if God has had this blessing that he's been wanting to give you? But listen to me, because he's a good God, he hasn't given it to you yet. Because he knows if he gave it to you, you'd think it's just coincidence. And he's been waiting for you to actually speak to him and get quiet where you share with him, and then that he might bring that blessing into your life so you would know without a shadow of a doubt, the Lord has blessed my life. Friends, what if there's something so much greater in these next 2 weeks than the content that our creators make for us? Or the interactions on Facebook and social media? I would invite you, friends, if you want to build something that truly lasts this year, this is a great way to start off in the right direction. So I want to pray with you, and I want to ask the Holy Spirit to bring wisdom to you of what it is that you need to eliminate. For some of you, you're like, I don't even watch YouTube, that doesn't matter. But for someone else, me, it's like, okay, that takes up like an hour of my day every day, to be honest with you, right? Or maybe for you, it's some other thing. It's Reddit, or it's something else I jump on, or it's TikTok and it's scrolling at this time, or whatever it might be. And I just want to pray in this moment that God would identify these things to you, not in a spirit of conviction, but listen to me, in a spirit of, for whatever good this might bring and joy it might bring to you, I have something even greater I would love to communicate with you in these next 2 weeks. Would you pray with me for a second? God, I thank you so much for what a good God you are, and I thank you for the fact that you are constantly speaking to us. I pray right now that you would send your Holy Spirit to help each of us to prayerfully ask you, God, what is it you would like me to fast from? What is it that you would like me to lay aside so that I might grow my desire for what is even greater? God, I pray in these next 2 weeks that you would speak to your church like never before. That for some of us, we would go like, I didn't even know this was possible. I didn't even know this was possible, that I could hear from the Lord this much, that I could sense how much he's communicating to me. And God, I pray that for us as a church, it would change us deeply, where we would just recognize, wow, if I just give him time, He is so faithful to speak. God, I pray that you would move in mighty ways by your Holy Spirit in our lives. We would sense your strength and we would sense your wisdom in these moments where we offer them up to you, where we get quiet. And I pray, God, that by the end of these 14 days, we would know you more. We would sense where you're working in our lives, and God, we would be able to join that so that we could truly put our energy and effort into something that would last. God, bless your church. I know you want to. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.